So I rise today to join a chorus of my colleagues in speaking out against the nomination of Stephen Mnuchin to serve as Secretary of the Department of Treasury. What I believe is if you look at Mr. Mnuchin's record, he has spent a lot of time benefiting, and in fact even exploiting families who are struggling homeowners in my state. I'd like to read to the record a report from the NPR from November of last year, which makes this pattern stunningly clear. During the depths of the financial crisis, it reads, Mnuchin was looking to make profits from the ruins of the housing bust. In 2009, he put together a group of billionaire investors and bought a failed California bank called IndyMac. It had been taken over by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation after its sketchy mortgage loans went seriously bad. Mnuchin and his partners bought IndyMac on the condition that the FDIC agree to pay future losses above a certain threshold. They renamed the bank One West Bank, and after running it for 6 years, they sold it last year for a profit estimated at close to $1.5 billion. Kevin Stein of the California Reinvestment Coalition, a housing advocacy group, says that the profit was made on the backs of suffering Californian homeowners. Homeowners, and this is not in the text here, but homeowners who were suffering from a massive mortgage collapse that was created in many ways or stimulated by the greed and avarice of bad actors. I witnessed this myself in Newark, New Jersey, watching people feed upon a subprime mortgage environment where they were pushing bad loans on unsuspecting borrowers. Back to the text. In essence, what they did is they bought a foreclosure machine, he says. According to the coalition, One West foreclosed on more than 36,000 homeowners under Mnuchin. Under the time, the FDIC made payments to One West totaling more than $1 billion. Those payments went to the billionaire investors of One West Bank, says Stein, to cover the cost of foreclosing on working class, everyday American folks, many of them who were living in California. And so this was what we saw at the height of the financial crisis. Mr. Mnuchin, already very wealthy, already very successful, didn't see Americans struggling, didn't join efforts to try to empower, support, or deal with this crisis. What he saw was an opportunity to take over a financial institution and continue, if not accelerate, the foreclosures that were going on. It had become painfully clear that what Mr. Mnuchin oversaw in the operations of this bank, that as a business model, he set out to explicitly continue to manipulate homeowners into foreclosure. This one article that I read has been repeated by organizations, by news outlets all over the spectrum, talking about how Mr. Mnuchin in this environment worked very hard to go accelerate foreclosures and take advantage of this and make a profit. From elderly widows, the stories continue, to families, to small business owners, to active duty service members, many victims of Mr. Mnuchin's bank's predatory tactics, taking advantage of folks in a crisis as opposed to trying to figure out a way to support folks through it. I'd like to read one more from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, an article that documented one instance of this disturbingly prevalent practices of Mr. Mnuchin's company. The headline reads, "Negotiating on foreclosure, then locked out during a blizzard." A Minneapolis woman who was negotiating with a lender to find a way to stay in her foreclosed house, stepping back from the text, someone who was working hard to do the right thing in negotiations. Back to the text, they arrived home from work during Tuesday, that blizzard, to find that locks had been changed. After spending the night at her mother's, Leslie Parks went Wednesday to Hennepin County Housing Court, where a referee ordered that she be allowed back into her mother's former duplex at 3749 Park Avenue, while negotiations continued. Locksmiths on Wednesday reconfigured the locks that had been changed Tuesday by a contractor for One West Bank. These are the kind of tactics that were being used, the kind of hardball tactics that were being used by Mr. Mnuchin's company that really undermined a lot of hardworking Americans from a variety of backgrounds in many different states. And his record is clear. Mr. Mnuchin not only advocated and supported this company and its tactics, but even now, he talks about trying to roll back the kind of protections that have been put in place to try to protect average Americans. Many of them are in the Dodd-Frank legislation that help to protect against the creation of an environment in which such predatory practices can take place. This position that Mr. Mnuchin has been nominated for, which is the Secretary of Treasury, has a critical role within our economy. But one of those roles has to be the idea that average Americans will be protected from the kind of financial victimization that was going on during the recession and actually which led into the recession. We see that we can prevent Wall Street from burdening Main Street with the costs while they reap the rewards. This is the broken system that we saw in the past that needs fixing and needs healing. We don't need one of the architects of the system that caused so much pain to be in one of the most important positions in our land. The head of this vital agency must be someone who understands their responsibility to look out for the struggling American trying to make it by playing by the rules, and someone that's qualified and willing to direct the department to fiercely protect the economic security of our nation, the economic well-being of the American people, and the integrity of our financial system. I do not believe Mr. Mnuchin is that person. He has made it clear in his decades-long career that he's willing for a profit to work hard to exploit hard-working families and shortchanging homeowners for that personal gain. This is unacceptable. Mr. Mnuchin has built a career and has reaped literally millions of dollars in success by pushing people, by exploiting people, and by hurting people. The American people cannot afford to suffer through another financial crisis, and it can't afford to have a master Wall Street manipulator put in the position that we should be relying on to protect us from that kind of financial manipulation. This is a difficult economy where people in our country are still struggling under challenging financial times. I believe that we can make a nation where people can do good and do well at the same time, where we shouldn't elevate or celebrate people who really fed off of the misery and the challenges of others, but instead that we can have a nation where we put people, regardless of their political background, in positions like the Department of Treasury that celebrate the best of who we are, the best of our values, people that are public servants, people that have shown a commitment to not only serve, but even sacrifice for one another. What we saw amidst this crisis, amidst a crisis that in many ways was aggravated and caused by greed and avarice in the mortgage industry, in the banking industry, amongst rating agencies, as we saw many people show who they were in a time of American struggle and American crisis. We saw with clarity where people's priorities were. Was it exploiting people? Was it manipulating systems for their own avarice and their own benefit? Or was it for being there for our country, trying to make things better, trying to give people bridges that could carry them from financial struggle and strain to stability, or people that were trying to crumble those bridges and have people free fall in financial distress? This is unfortunately what we see here today, where we have President Trump trying to elevate someone who has not shown a record of someone who wanted to help, but instead show a record of someone who wanted to hurt. That, to me, is unacceptable, especially at this time where so many American families are still struggling to get back on their feet, to find financial security, and find the pathway to their American dream. It is for this reason and more that I cannot support this nomination. Mr. President, I'm grateful for the time to speak. Thank you.